Today is Monday, June 20th, 2024. My name is Nia Salway and I am in Shoreview, Minnesota. Joining me in person for an oral history interview is Jason Knighton-Johnson. This interview is a part of an oral history project that is documenting the family histories of descendants of the Fractions and the Prestons whose ancestors lived at Solitude and Smithfield plantations in Blacksburg, Virginia. Thank you, Jason, for your willingness to share your story. Do I have your permission to record this interview?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Could you please state your full name for the record?
Jason Alexander Knighton-Johnson.
Thank you. I would like to begin with when and where you were born.
I was born in Robbinsdale, Minnesota, in 1975.
And is that where you grew up as well?
I grew up kind of all over Minnesota, but I would call the Rondo neighborhood of St. Paul my home.
That's your home. What was it like growing up with your family there?
Our family was always really close. I did not know my father. So my father, who I call my father, actually married my mother later in life and became my father. But we've always had just a kind of a close-knit type family. We grew up with all of our uncles, aunts, cousins, grandparents. We were always all together. Yeah, it was true communal society. Structures the way we grew up.
What was it like having that dynamic with your family?
Man, I think that's a hard question to answer because I don't know what it's like not having that dynamic. You know what I mean? It was just my frame, my reality.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that's how everyone grew up, was that way.
Mm-hmm.
I have lots of conversations with people that when I ask me questions about, hey, what was it like growing up with this social economic status or this or that, and I don't know any different. This is who we were.
Right.
You know, so I enjoyed it very, very much.
Mm-hmm.
As all families, we had ups and we had downs, but then we always got through those all together. I can say that as growing up to today, it's different because as you grow and get older and you start to have your family of your own, that tight knit starts to spread a little bit. But when it does come back together, it's like nothing changed.
Yeah.
You know, because we grew up so close.
Mm-hmm. What were some of your favorite things doing with your family?
We were all always together, so it's kind of everything. If we want to go back to memories, my grandparents bought a lake home in Pequot Lakes, Minnesota, which is about 2 hours from where we are right now. We have a if someone enters our family, even if you exit our family, you're still part of our family. And so when divorces happened, it didn't mean people left, it just meant that people added on. So it grew as we started to fragment and expand. We always had a holiday, which was 4th of July for us, to come together and always all be together. And so it was just one of those times where it wasn't even about what we did, but it was the fact that, and in fact, a lot of times we actually did absolutely nothing but just go sit on the lake. But it was about intentional time where we all just spent time together.
Right.
You know, and so those are the things that I remember the most.
Mm-hmm. I know you brought up 4th of July. What
Mm-hmm.
other holidays did you guys celebrate?
Well, all the traditional. You know, Christmas was a big holiday for us that we all got together. Thanksgiving was a big holiday. But as I reflect back and think back, the most meaningful times was that time. Mm-hmm. And again, it had nothing to do with what the holiday was. It had to do with the fact that this was the intentional time that we were all together. And it wasn't, hey, we're going to be together we can be there from 9 to 12 and then we have to go someplace else. This was just our time for us.
Right. And how has that impacted you as you've gotten older and built your own family?
So we want to intentionally have time like that and understanding that. And so myself with my family, I'm on my second marriage as well. And between my wife and I, we have 6 children. Every other Sunday is intentional time that we're just together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's been centered around having dinner, but sometimes it's just about playing beanbags in the front yard or doing whatever. But we have that intentional time.
Right. Can you tell me about grade school? What was it like coming up in grade school?
So getting into education, this is now you're getting into my passion. But unpacking my educational experience, I ended up moving around a lot, even though we had stability, and so I went to if you count kindergarten as part of grade school, the elementary experience, K through 6. I went through to 5 different schools, and so it was a lot of moving around, a lot of transitions. For me, it was tough because, especially being so young, moving so much, it was hard developing bonds and relationships. But the fact that our family was always so close, it really didn't matter that much to me because we always had those bonds and relationships, and especially being from our side of the family, the oldest, it allowed me to have bonds with the younger because of necessity that I cherish today. You know what I mean?
Right. So in your junior high school experiences, how did you navigate not only your academics but also coming into yourself?
Well, I can tell you I didn't navigate academics very well. Not because I didn't have the capacity to do it, but because I didn't have the want to do it. Can't point to a reason why, but that's just what it was. I do not come from an uneducated family. I was nowhere near a first generation college student. It was the expectation for us as who we are. If you look at my generation, a majority of us have advanced degrees. Not that that's the path that you have to walk, but the fact that we had the opportunity and we're given the love and nurturing support to get that, for me was more about the support that I got from my family than the support I got from the K-12 system, which is why I do what I do.
So let's talk about what you do and why you do what you do.
All right, so I was working in education. My role is I'm the Director of Educational Equity at a school district here in Minnesota. My path into education took a big detour when I originally went to college. Actually, as a kid, and this may be weird, but all I ever wanted to be was a teacher. And anytime anyone asked me that question, it wasn't I didn't want to go to the NFL, I didn't want to play in the NBA, I wanted to be a teacher. It's what I wanted to do. And so I started my college career at the University of Minnesota, Duluth campus. And I was a math education major. And my advisor at the time gave me some very interesting advice. He told me, he said, Jason, you are too smart to go into education. And he said, you need to go into research. And so I transitioned my degree from math education to applied mathematics, which was actually better for me because skill-wise suited the math portion of my educational piece I really have to work towards. It was the other stuff that was difficult for me. So it made my path easier to graduation, just having to focus on math. But when I got to the end, I was like, I don't want to do anything that has to do with this. You know, it doesn't fit who I believe we're all complex. We all have sides to us, and I have that academic side for mathematical theory, but that's not who I am. My personality is not that, and so I ended up going into sales and working in marketing for some time and being fairly successful, making very good money, but miserable because I wasn't doing kind of what my purpose was. I always stayed tied to education somehow. I was actually just retired last year. I was a coach of high school sports for 27 years. And so I always managed to make sure that worked, that I could do that, so I could have that one foot in education. But the mindset is that the teaching wasn't for me anymore. And I got to the point where it really didn't matter to me that what the money was, so I wasn't happy. And so I was actually not that far from where we're sitting right now was my office for the company I worked for, and I quit my job. We were actually coming back from closing a deal with a auto manufacturer in Los Angeles, and I was sitting at the airport with the president of our company, and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And kind of trying to figure out where to go and what to do. I had lots of opportunities in the business world. My ex-wife at the time probably would say I probably should have taken some of those, but for some reason I got offered a $12 an hour job as a para at a level 4 EBD ASD school up in a city called Malacca in the middle of no place. And that just, it said that's where I need to be. And that led to 10 years later me sitting here as the Director of Educational Equity for the school district. So I think I rambled on to know exactly what it is you wanted me to explain there, but that was my path. My work here is very simple. How do we focus on the achievement of each student? That's been part of the vision that I've had as leading our equity initiatives here within our school district. When I started within our school district, I'll be coming up on year 8 now, but I was brought in a role called the equity specialist. Actually, I didn't know what the role was, and to be honest, I actually didn't even apply for the role. There's someone who I worked with up in in Cambridge, the city I came from, and she saw the role and decided that I'd be perfect for it, and she filled out the Applitrack for me. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden she said, "Hey, you're probably going to get a call for an interview. I applied for a job for you." And I was like, "All right, sure." Mm-hmm. My oldest daughter was about to graduate high school. I was living in the town that I lived with my ex-wife. I was ready to move on for a change anyway. Mm-hmm. And I came, interviewed, they started talking about this thing called educational equity. Never said that before in my life. But did the interview, was offered the job. As I reflect back on this, and this is something that you all told me, be careful what you say because it's got to be public record, but I've said this publicly to the people who interviewed me. My last interview was with the superintendent of our school district and our 2 associate supes. I do not believe I was qualified at that point in time to lead equity. Definitely not for the district, but for school. But I got the job anyway. My belief is that I'm a non-threatening black man with my eyes look green in the right light, and so I would fit within the system. As I said that to him, to our superintendent, he kind of reflected on it. He didn't want to say yes or no, but if you look at the people who were doing that work, we were all kind of carbon copies of each other, to the point where there were 3 of us who were all bald black men with beards, so they had an image of what this role would be. And as I was going through the onboarding, I was asking my predecessor, he's actually still in the school district. He was moving from the school that I was at to another school. I asked him, I said, "No one still told me what we do." And he said, "You'll figure it out." Was what was told to me, and it didn't take long for me to understand that the role on paper was to support the equity initiatives for the building. We'll call that the big P policies is what I call it in my conversations. The little P policies, the things we don't talk about, the unwritten things, my job was to be the bad black boy liaison. And when there were young black men who were disrupting education, my job was to take over so that the education continued to go. I had zero desire to do that work whatsoever. And the principal of the building, when she introduced me for the first time, introduced me as part of her administrative team. And so what that said to me was, okay, I got medicinal power to do what I want. They haven't outlined what they want me to do, so I'm going to build this the way I want to build this. And so my focus became, I'm not here to do equity work. It's my job to build capacity within every adult in the system so that each student can achieve. And I went back to leverage my time in the business world to start talking about systems and structures. In the business world, if your structures aren't in place, you don't get paid. And so I take that exact same mindset and bring it to education. How do we build structures around the work that we do? Even when I say I build capacity, I had to be able to define what capacity means so I can help teach people to become a district for each student. You know what I mean? There's a woman by the name of Zaretta Hammond. She wrote a book called Culture Responsive Teaching in the Brain. Beautiful book. talks about the goal is to create independent learners. And I'm doing my best to paraphrase it. It's been 8 years since I read the book, so forgive me, but the independent learner is a learner who can take knowledge and through their own critical thinking skills, extract what they need out of that knowledge and then build from there. Versus the dependent learner, who is, you sit there, I'm going to give you the knowledge you need to be able to spit that knowledge back to me. In looking to build capacity within the system, what I found is we look at the adults in the educational system as independent learners, but the reality is that 100% of us that have gone through the educational system went through a system designed around sit and get. You in particular, unfortunately, come from the No Child Left Behind generation, which meant it's not only sit and get, but it's sit and get to a test. And so the structures are not designed for you to become an independent learner. So the educators who are expected to make independent learners of students were all taught dependent learners. So how do we build structures to leverage the fact that they're dependent learners to get them what they need? You know, and so that is my abstract way of saying I needed to build structure to help people understand what it meant to be a school district for each student, and at the same time help people understand that their frame of reference is not wrong, though it may lead to outcomes that we don't want. Does that make sense when I say that? And so, I'm trying not to run down a path of turning this into a professional development and educational equity, but that really becomes the work that I do. My job today is rewind. COVID. When COVID happened, it really had me reflect on the work that I was actually doing. As an equity leader, I believe that my role was focused on changing the system. COVID reminded me that I was actually an intervention. And what I mean by that is this: when the world went to distance learning for education, I had absolutely nothing to do. And so literally I got paid to sit on my couch and just make sure I was logged on to the computer. If a kid needed something, I could do something. I was the intervention. They didn't need me as an intervention if all they had to do was mute a kid that was being off task. Take that and also leverage the fact that COVID helped me to unsilo myself from my building to see the things that were going on in other buildings and how the things we are calling successes, specifically for our young black men, I would not outline as success. And what I mean by that is, so there are 6 of us that do this work in the district as an equity specialist at the time, and we were at a meeting, and I ended up coming to the meeting late, and it was a virtual meeting, and 2 of our equity specialists from our 2 high schools were talking, and they were talking about a young man who hadn't found a college yet. And they said this young man's name, and I know him from coaching track and field, being a long jump, triple jump coach. I coached against this young man. He's probably one of the best jumpers in the state of Minnesota at the time. And I'm like, how is this kid not in college? And so as I'm unpacking the story with him, he's a young man who he was on an IEP. He was a behavior issue in middle school. He got to high school and everything, just never suspended in high school, never in trouble. Good kid. C's for grades. Not a very good ACT score. And because of that, all the traditional structures that you would go through for a young man as an athlete weren't available to him. But we have a school that's not that far from where we are right now called Concordia University. It's a private school, but they compete at the Division II level, which means that they can give private school money and they can give athletic money. And I know the guidelines for getting the school there because part of our work is I want to understand every school in the state of Minnesota so I can understand if you want to go here, how I can help you get there. I knew he could fit. And so I called another equity leader that I know that was there. Her name was Dr. Cheryl Chapman. Again, another mentor of mine. And I said, Dr. Chapman, I got this kid. Here he is. ACT score is not that great. GPA is not that great. He wants to be an engineer. Help me out. And she was retiring that year. She had $70,000 worth of scholarship money to give away. She said, just get him to fill out the FAFSA. I can get him a scholarship. We'll be good. We couldn't get the family to do it because when sitting with his dean told his family that they are not doing ACT retakes right now because of COVID. Your ACT doesn't qualify. You need to look at going to community college and then maybe transferring to a 4-year degree. Plus, if you go this route, you're not going to have all the student loans and all the scary things that we tell kids, about 4-year programs. My belief in doing this work is if a kid graduates from our school district, if they want to be a plumber, that is awesome. I'm going to help them walk that path. But if they change their mind as soon as they grab their diploma and they want to go to Harvard and be a doctor, they should still have that opportunity. And that's how we should do this work. Right. We steered this kid towards the path that we felt that he should go down versus the opportunities that he would have. I had 4 years of scholarship waiting for this young man that wanted to be a mechanical engineer. But his family wanted him to be a mechanic because he'd make $100,000 in 6 years and have zero student loan debt. Which is awesome, but that wasn't his passion. You know what I mean? And so we steered them towards this. And here's the best part about all this. 100% of the kids that graduate, they're going to have a really good frickin' life. No matter what it is. They could work at Burger King and struggle every single day of their life. They're still going to have their happy times. They're just going to have their struggles. Just like that doctor who makes $3 million is going to have his happy times and struggles. So it's not about this young man not having a wonderful life. It's about the fact that we put him on that path versus him being able to decide what path he wants to walk. Right. I've been able to decide what path I want to walk. And I want to make sure that we build the structures to do that. And so you take COVID and those realizations, and then you take the murder of George Floyd. My will to do equity work was gone because I have zero desire to be an intervention. We are saying the same things educational equity-wide today that we said when I was in school, when I graduated from high school in 1994, which is the same things that they were saying when my Uncle Greg graduated in school in high school in 1984, which is the same things that were probably said in 1934. You know what I mean? And so that's because we've done this work as an intervention. It's on top. It's let's bring in these people to do this work. And when we say equity and you say these people, we're talking about you bring in black faces that do equity work. My will to do that was gone. Our superintendent saw that in me, and it was the first conversation that he and I had since the interview process. And he actually called me on my cell phone, and I told him I don't want to do this anymore, and here's why. And he said what he asked of me is he asked me to be patient and outline what I think this work should look like. And so I took some time to design to say, what if we actually did equity work from a place of being proactive? What if we stopped lying to ourselves about what our equity work is about? The feel-good social-emotional piece of having a community of belonging is awesome. But the reason why we actually want to have a community of belonging is not so that black kid isn't called the N-word. It's so that black kid can achieve and have the opportunity. And it's also not just about that black kid. I knew I made it in this work when I had a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white kid. His dad was the CFO for Medtronics, which is a major corporation in our school district. He was sitting in my office and he said, "Mr. Johnson, they don't use the Knighton part. The kids don't. I'm feeling marginalized." And I said, everything within my mind said, "Are you kidding me, kid?" Mm-hmm. Because what I was doing is I was throwing weight. Mm-hmm. I was throwing weight. How's this white kid that's got all these things, how's he going to feel marginalized? And I went into it with no judgment. I said, his frame is not wrong. Let me expand my frame to understand his. Mm-hmm. And we had a really dumb practice in middle school because middle school grades don't mean anything, but a really done practice where we outline 9 valedictorians in our middle school. And each one of them gets to do a speech. And because they chose 9 this particular time, they weren't going to do the speeches live. They had the kids record the speeches, and they were going to play the speeches on the announcements. This young man was the only speech that didn't play on the announcements. And the reason why is because he thanked his parents, he thanked his teachers, and then he thanked God. And because he thanked God, the white principal chose to remove his speech. And as he's speaking to me and talking, he talked about how his faith means so much to him, but not to the point where he thinks other faiths are wrong, but to the point where he's curious about what other faiths believe in. And he had practiced Eid, or Ramadan, excuse me. He had celebrated Eid with his Muslim friends. We have signs up that says, prayer room is this way, but our structures are designed for him not to be able to use those prayer rooms. And my faith being as important to me as it is, my friend was able to expand and see that. You know, equity work is about each kid and getting each kid what they need to succeed. And it's not just about the deficits, it's about the kids that can achieve as well. You know what I mean? And so I mapped that out, and the previous coordinator within our district, it wasn't the vision that we had, and they said, all right, well, here you go, here's the keys, go do it. And so I've been spending the past 3 years looking to build, which I believe is the first equity department that's solely focused on trying to do proactive work. I do have a reactive component. I have teams that are designed to work with students and get the students the things that they need. But as an equity specialist, I looked at it like this. 60% of my time was with kids, 40% of my time was with the adults in the system. If I make those numbers simple, let's say I was working with 60 kids and 40 adults. I impacted 60 kids' lives, one-on-one. But each one of those adults probably impacted 5 kids' lives. Does that make sense? So I just took that. So now I impacted, what's that? Do that math real quick, 260 kids. It's right. As people are shaking their head, it's right. I'm a math major. It's right. If I flip-flop that and I work with 60 adults and 40 kids, I just grow my capacity. What if I build a structure? I said that I create a team that our job is to work with the adults in the system around being a district for each student. And we'll divide that into responsibilities. My responsibility is operations. So I am the theory person of how we do this work. I work with the principals, I work with the district leadership. I outline the path that we need to walk in the structure. I have somebody, and I just lost her because she's going to go back into the building, but I had a principal on special assignment that she focused on the instructional side. So she's working with teachers and PLCs and coaching into principals on the instructional vision of how to be a district for each student. And then I have someone on the student support side that's talking about, hey, how am I working with deans? Those same deans that told a kid, hey, you can't take the ACT, and so you can't go to 4-year degrees, when the other thing that came out during COVID is they said, we don't care about ACT anymore. Just tell us your story, you know what I mean? But how are we building capacity of the deans? How are we building capacity within the system? If we can affect every adult in the system, now we can actually touch every kid in the system, versus having 6 people trying to react to the needs of how many non-white students we have within our school district. And then me saying, hey, we need to expand our frame to say, hey, those white kids, they need this work too, because they're being marginalized as well. So that's kind of the work I want to do. I want to do it from a place of application, not a place of theory. I do not want to, a lot of people who do, and I've had some conflict with people who do this work, they tell me that I'm doing my work catering it to whiteness. And I say, no, I'm using dominant cultural structures to change the dominant cultural system. There's an analogy. I was just talking with someone about this just yesterday. they say you can't tear the master's house down with the master's tools. I say that's bullshit, because those are the only tools you got. Because those are the only tools that you're allowed to bring into that house. You know what I mean? So one of the things I was tasked to do was put on a foundational equity training for the school district. In talking about using the catering to whiteness, using their structures, it wasn't my training. It was the superintendent's training. I built it. I scheduled it. But when the schedule came out, it had to come from him, because it had to be his voice, because that's the voice that they hear, because we live in a hierarchical structure. I do not believe in doing preach equity. I do not do this work to shame people. I do not do this work to tell people everything they're doing wrong. I can help someone see the impact of their actions. I do this work to take the steps to get us to the ideal state. I am not going to close the achievement gap. And in fact, I don't even like talking about the achievement gap. I like more let's talk about the proficiency debt that is owed. It is our job to make sure 100% of the students that come through this district are proficient. Period. I'm not going to do that. But if we build structures in place that are rooted in the current systems that are designed to lead to outcomes for each student, then whoever comes in doesn't have to start back at ground zero. So that is a long-winded overview of the work that we do. It is extremely abstract because, like I said, I don't think it's been done before. I do this work from a place of utilizing systems tools to be able to speak to those who are dependent learners, to help them understand that we need to validate each student, but then also help them grow and understand how we do that, not based upon my convictions, but based upon our systemic convictions. So, clearly, I don't know if I answered any questions you asked me, but
you answered many questions that I didn't even ask it. So clearly this is something you're very passionate about.
A little bit.
I'm curious to know where that passion began and throughout your journey how it multiplied in a sense.
Yep, absolutely. You asked me about my educational experience, and then you also asked me about what it felt like growing up. And my answer to my educational experience was I moved around a lot and it wasn't great. And my answer to the other question was, well, I don't know what it was like. It's just what it was like. I didn't know any better. You know what I mean? So I left K-12 thinking that this is just what it's supposed to be. Honestly, I left K-12 thinking that there's something wrong with me as a student, because I would rather mess up in class and fight than do the academic things that I see my family is about. You know what I mean? Right. Where my passion came, when I took that job at the EBD school as a para. I was in that job for maybe a month, and kind of before you know what, I was writing behavior plans for kids. I was writing reintegration plans for kids going back to school. I was the roadblock for schools sending kids to our location. And what I found was there was a bar that was so high for a kid who was removed from a school to achieve in that school to get back, that it just didn't seem right to me. It felt like I can walk, if a kid was coming back from the level 4 setting, the things that kid had to do, the things that would get that kid sent out in comparison to the things that a gen ed student would do. Am I making sense when I'm saying that? It didn't sit right for me. You know, I didn't know I was saying equity. I just knew I was saying this don't smell right, and then there's something wrong here. And so, when I knew that it was time for me to move on and figure out what I was going to do next. Actually, the precursor to me coming here to the school district, I was with a young man. He had autism. He had actually been at our school before as an elementary school kid through, I think, 5th grade, and then left, and then came back as an 8th grader. And he was a really cute little autistic kid, is how he was described by the school that he came from as an elementary school kid. But as a middle schooler, he became 6'4" and almost 300 pounds. And so now, what was cute before now was deemed dangerous. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up, I knew that I was moving on, and so I ended up working specifically with this kid quite a bit at our school. And then when he did earn mainstream, I would go with him there, and watching the way that he was treated, it baffles me. And then also watching how we put these systems and structures into play. Every student on special student that's labeled special ed has an individual education plan, an IEP. That plan is a legal document that's designed to be followed. And as I would walk through the gen ed setting and watch these plans not being followed, it helped me to understand why so many kids were coming to us. And so we had a great time. Hunter and I spent probably 4 out of the 8 school day hours together at the high school, and we were having lunch one day, and we're ending lunch, which was always high anxiety for me because there were so many kids that were and it was so unstructured. And the way that they functioned is they had all the kids in IEPs leave first. And there was a student who, within the student's IEP, it was required that this student, because of her diagnosis, was a 2-on-1s. They're required to have 2 paras. I know that because I know Hunter, and I need to know who Hunter is going to be around, so I read the IEPs for every student, so I knew what was needed. And what they had was they had 1 para with this group of students that were leaving. And something happened that scared this young lady, and she turned around and she slapped the student that I was with, which triggered him, and now it became part of my job was to make sure people were safe. And so Hunter threw 57 punches, and the reason why I know that is because the school told me that, because they went through and counted them, because they were going to use that as a reason for him not to come back to school. What they said was I was hit 57 times. I was never hit at all. And we blocked all 57 punches. Excuse me, I take that back. I blocked 56 punches. He did hit 1 person. Someone came in and tried to grab him from behind, a para who never read his IEP, which said he is not somebody that we restrain, we block. And so Hunter punched this person in the face. It was us as a system that failed that student, not that student failed. And the whole process of me defending this student to keep the student in school was me having to convince us that we didn't do our job versus there's something wrong with the kid. Fast forward to the work that we do, we have traditional structures that are in place. They do not work for every student. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with the student. It means there's something wrong with the structure. Does that make sense? And so how do we adjust the structures to the student versus the student to the structure? It's about evolve the system. And I think every educational system you go to says we're continuously improving. But what do we actually change and do that improvement? What we're improving is our interventions to assimilate the students. So that's where my passion comes from. So as I unpack my educational journey, I can see how I was being groomed to be assimilated and not be able to be who I am. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And so that, and added the fact that I came here older. I came here in your 20s, you need the job. In your 30s, you have the job. You're young, you'll understand that someday, what I'm saying. And so when you have the job and you don't need the job, you can tell folks what you are going to do and aren't going to do. And I was just in a position to be able to do this thing that I'm passionate about and do it the right way, and be able to validate the fact that my voice actually matters and can make a difference for a kid, no matter who that kid is. Right. It's tough being here because you don't have student contact anymore. But you can actually see that we're actually doing systemic changes here, and so, I'm sorry, I'm long-winded.
No.
This is what I do.
That was good. Thank you so much for that response. I know you're not really one for history because your passion is in the present and the future, but grappling with the history of slavery within America, I'm curious to know if you have seen any of the legacy present within the school system, and if so, in what ways would you say?
I would say absolutely. But again, viewing it from a different lens. There's a population of this work that wants to do this work from a place of shame. Actually, the first PD I did here within our school district, I was told by someone, "You are a spectacular presenter, but you need to shame people more." I do not believe that I have the positional power to do that or the cultural capital to do that, because as a black man in the system, I'm here to influence the system. They can turn my voice off just as fast because they don't have to do this work. You know what I mean? And so, do you see the traditional structures of slavery within the system? Absolutely, when you look at the achievement of our students of color. Do I see the effects? Absolutely. You can start with the data. You can look at the data of achievement. But you'll see the effects for many marginalized students. We can see the effects of our Asian students who come from refugee backgrounds. You know, you see the effects. You see the effects of trauma, generational trauma, in achievement. You also see the effects of mental models and bias into how people are treated and how people treat themselves based on that mindset as well. I was having this discussion with somebody around the concept of education. And as slaves, education wasn't something that was offered to us. As a student that comes from a family, college degrees were present, I believe to be educated was me not being a part of my black self. Because that's what the white kids did. And this is what we did. And it was I look at it like a post-traumatic stress that we've stereotype, where you believe the stereotype, we've bought in, where we've equated our blackness to not being a part of the educational system. And equating our blackness to not being a part of the educational system has allowed that achievement gap or that proficiency gap to expand, which says, yes, I need to address the systems, but I also need to address the mental models of who we are. Part of our reactionary work is I get the phone calls from families who say, "Hey, this happened and it's racist," and we'll go address that. But I can tell you this: over this last school year, if we outline the 56 kids who were sent to our suspension program for fighting this, the 80 kids, who were sent to our suspension program for fighting this year, we did not have one fight that was a white kid fighting a black kid. Not one. Every fight was us fighting ourselves. And so seeing that mental model, that mindset of we don't belong so much, and so we are going to find ways that are anti-us belonging in the system, is where I see the effects, the systemic effects coming from slavery. I look at it from that lens because if I want to change an outcome, I need to be self-reflective. You know, you all just talked about me in this microphone and how every time I get to speaking of myself, I start here. This is where I have to start. I absolutely went through an educational system that wasn't looked at from a frame that would benefit me. But I had actions within that system because of that pushed me even farther away. You know, now we can have the debate, is it the chicken or the egg that came first? But it really doesn't matter, because both need to be adjusted for us to achieve success. You know what I mean? And then actually there have been times where I've looked and I've seen the effects, and it breaks my heart. You all were adamant that we put this picture behind. I am a story from his memoirs that stands out is how he was conning the poor white kids to teach him to read. How he would steal food and then make bets with the white kids over who knew more words, and then give that food to them when they would know more words, but then he was adding those words to his repertoire. And so the proactive pace and the risk that he took to want this educational system, I can't even put into words, how inspiring that is.
Mm-hmm.
But then to see that if we talk about equity education from a place of opportunity and access, okay, I'm talking opportunity and access. Let's take away mental model and bias for a second. If you talk about opportunity and access, we all have opportunity and access. And unfortunately, the anti-equity people, that's what they like to get on the TikTok and talk about. Well, tell me something you can do as I can do as a white person that you can't do as a black person. You're right. The opportunity and access is there. The structures have been designed to make us not want to take that opportunity and access. And in fact, in my humble belief, I think more of us are taking the opportunity and access, but the camera is shining on the ones who are not, and that is the narrative of who we are, and that is the level of what our blackness should be. You know what I mean? And
oh my gosh, can I jump in for a question now? They usually allow me to ask questions at the end, because one of the questions that I would ask would bounce right onto this.
Yep.
Opportunity and access.
Yep.
That some of the legacy of slavery is whether or not we take on that opportunity and
100%.
access. Sometimes one of the questions I ask for Descendants is, knowing that Virginia Tech, Virginia Tech is where the plantation was.
Yep.
Knowing Virginia Tech is very much a PWI.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's slightly over 1,000 students out of a 30 or 40,000 student campus.
You're about to walk me down a path that I really want. I'm ready to walk.
You know where I'm going, right? Blacksburg, where it is very much a white township.
Yep.
And one of the questions that I'm asked, with the family is, do you guys want free tuition and fees at Tech? My answer was no, because I didn't think that was a place where we should be, even if the access and everything was there. Right, so you know where I'm going. I know where I'm going. So my question is,
we are family, and we're about to throw, me and you are going to throw down right now.
We are.
Here we go. All right. I'm going to tell you this. Your answer should have been yes. Here's why. There may be one of us that chooses it, and when we're talking about each, that one matters. Okay, I'm going to start there. Sorry to be so theoretical.
Right.
Maslow. Hierarchy of needs. I need to have my basic survival needs met. Then my safety needs. Then my belonging needs. Then I can get to achievement. Then I can self-actualize. We've all learned Maslow as a pyramid. Okay, you all are going to see why there's writing all over my wall, because I am a writer. I've done my best to sit here. I want to grab this and start writing. We've all seen Maslow as a pyramid. Maslow never intended for this to be a mere pyramid. He envisioned it as a stair step or a ladder. And in fact, if you really want to get into it, if we're talking about appropriation, his hierarchy of needs actually come from Blackfoot Indians in his time that he spent there on the reservation, and he utilized it as his own. You know what I mean? So, but here nor there. Sorry. If you think about it as a stair step, do we take the access opportunity? Okay, people will hear me say that and say you're putting on the kids. I absolutely 100% am not. You need to be in a position where you can see that you can actually take that. So what I mean by that is I have to show that I actually belong. So often within the educational system, our structures are set up is to belong, which is the third step. You have to achieve, which is the fourth step. So we flip those two things around. So you have kids that have to climb this step of achievement that are never belonging and having to deal with the emotional structures that they have of not belonging and still do that work. That's what you're walking. Do we belong here? Here's the thing. It's on Virginia Tech to build systems and structures that say each student belongs. it is on us as a school district to say each student belongs. It's on me as an equity specialist to say each family belongs. So when I have that anti-critical race theory family that sits in that chair right there and yells at me, I have to understand, you know what? This is their district too. I need to build structures that they belong. And in fact, let me ease your tension. I don't teach critical race theory. It's not something that's in my repertoire of things I do with educational equity. Now, our whole conversation is rooted in the fact that it's rooted in the tenets of critical race theory we're doing right now. But your convictions matter. I need you to be a part of this as well. We can't do educational equity work cannot be about the black kids. It has to be about each kid. I said it 1,000 times, and I will say it 1,000 times because that's what matters. It's written on the wall behind you can't see because there's a chair there, but it's about each kid. And how do we build structures where each kid belongs? Because that kid, those kids that are fighting in the hallway, they do not feel like they belong in their classroom. And so they want to belong, so they find the place they belong. Their place to belong is in the hallway because that's what the stereotype says. Now, I don't know if any of you have spent much time in high school, but I will tell you this. Nobody wins a fight in high school. The fight never ends. It always is broken up right away. They're not doing it for an outcome. They're doing it because this is my place and where I belong. How do we help them change that mental model, expand their frame to realize this is where we have structures that have you belong here. That becomes our work that we do. Now, when you talk about the PWI, I'm going to be very controversial right now. Working education in the state of Minnesota, I'm struggling with our HBCUs right now as well. I'm having a major struggle. I had a young man who, he came from an all-black school before he came here. He was at an all-black charter school in Minneapolis. And he came to, I met him as a 7th grader. He came, he hated it because it wasn't an all-black school anymore. And he went back. He came back as an 8th grader. His grandmother called me and she said, Mr. Johnson, I need you to help me with my grandson. He got expelled from the charter school. He punched the PE teacher in the face. Sounds pretty extreme. All-black charter school. Black teacher, black kid. This young man happens to be homosexual. Nobody else's business, but he happens to be. He was always dressed nice. He decided his new fashion was he was going to wear Ugg boots. This black PE teacher says to him, why are you wearing those fag boots? You need to go put on some tennis shoes. And he responds by punching him in the face, and the kid was suspended. That's us doing that to us. This young man came to us, had a bumpy time in middle school, bumpy time at high school. He left our high school, went to our ALC. This young man who they said, when he came to us, probably wouldn't graduate, actually graduated early. I tried to convince him not to graduate early because I could send him to college, get him free college, but he just wanted to be done with this system and he wanted to go to Clark University. Take that out. He wanted to go to an HBCU. His family didn't have the money to pay the registration fee to hold his spot. So I paid it myself. I'm calling to try to figure, hey, I don't want to be in his system. I just want to pay this. I end up talking to their dean of finance, and this black woman says to me, well, you know he's not going to get in-state tuition. And if he can't afford the fee, how is he going to pay the tuition? Maybe he should think about someplace else. That's us to us. This work is about expanding our frame of reference. The HP in my frame right now, and you're catching me up. This was just last year, so you catch me. My frame will expand and I will soften. But my frame right now is the HBCU is a beautiful experience, and if you're from the South, we're here to help you have the experience. If you're from the North, we still want you to have the experience, but this is how we're going to supplement us kids from the South, and I don't think that's right either. You know what I mean? So we need to build structures in education where each student belongs, and their whole self, not just your black self or your gay self or your trans self or your poor self or your hip-hop self, whatever it is, your whole self is not only valued, but validated. You know what I mean? And our differences, your being different from me adds to my educational experience and vice versa. And if I'm not there, you know your educational experience is going to be limited because I'm not there. But we're painting this picture of us versus them right now. You know, which is why we have a school district here that our legislator mandated ethnic studies. And it was happening anyway. You know, you can look at it how you want to look at it, but the fact that there's Indigenous history taught in Minnesota studies in 6th grade says that we're all incompliant. We have a school district that the school board is trying to shut the district down because of ethnic studies. No, you need to say that my history is going to add to your personal experience, and vice versa. I need to know who Chester Arthur is. Who's Chester Arthur? Anybody know?
No.
Chester Arthur was a president of the United States. I didn't know that either.
Shame.
The only,
I should know that.
The only reason I know that is because when I was sleeping in my 10th grade social studies class, I slept through the whole class. My grandmother and I had just had a conversation about Abraham Lincoln, and we went to do a president's project. It was the first time I popped my head up, and I said to the teacher, "I'll do Abraham Lincoln." And he said to me, "No, you sleep in my class, you can do Chester Arthur." I said, "Who the hell's Chester Arthur?" He said, "He's a president." I went back to sleep. He created an opportunity for me to belong, and then he took it away from me as fast as he created it for me. Mm-hmm. We need to create systems where each one of us belong, because then we can achieve.
So good follow-up question to that. I really like that answer, and I appreciate it. Like I was saying, that I try to talk to the different descendants. Mm-hmm. We haven't been asked about tuition and fees. I'm trying to prepare for that conversation and getting all the... My mind is your whiteboard, and just getting all the thoughts down. How does Virginia Tech prepare to have descendants on campus? Not just because they're African Americans at a PWI, but they have an added layer of it being a ground zero of a traumatic history.
So, I'll be honest. I believe in structures. I don't think Virginia Tech needs to prepare any different than the University of Minnesota needs to protect. Any different than my 2 high schools need to protect, need to prepare. You have a unique cultural lens and identity based on who you are. 100% of my structures need to be relevant to you. If my structures aren't relevant to you, it doesn't matter what I give you. It has to be relevant, and I have to create systems that allow you to belong. Next, I have to understand that your trauma is real. The behavior that you're displaying is your communication speed is real. Every behavior that a kid has, every kid who fails out of Virginia Tech deserved to fail out of Virginia Tech. I'm going to say that up front. I'm not saying that because there's something wrong with the kid. I'm saying it because there's a real trauma that caused that kid to have to stop going to school. Something real is there. Well, all they did was drink beer. Awesome. The real behavior was an addiction to alcohol, which the effect was they were drinking. Or the effect was they failed out of school. How is that Virginia Tech's fault? Virginia Tech didn't make their program relevant enough to that student to understand why they should make this choice versus that choice. It's not the student's job, it's Virginia Tech's job. We get to higher ed and we say, nope, you're paying us. You should, absolutely not. You still need to create a structure that's belonging. You know what I mean? So what should Virginia Tech do? They should call Jason, and I can come in and be an educational consultant for them, and I can teach them the CLEAR model, and I can teach them the capacity equation, so they can become that school for each student. You know, that's what it's about. And it's also understanding that you are more than what I assign to you. And so your voice matters in me understanding how do I make this relevant to you. Okay? Last piece, relationship. I need to have true relationship. If Virginia Tech has to do something, they better figure out how to have true relationship with the Descendants. Not just we gave you free tuition so you should like us. You know what I mean? You should know my name. My oldest son, his name's Boston. Junior year of high school to senior year of high school, grew 8 inches. Gained about 40 pounds. Now all of a sudden this solid B squad football player, track athlete became, okay, this is somebody that folks want. He started getting recruited by schools throughout the state to play football. And the school he chose is called Bethel University. I did not think that's where he was going to go to school. As high school programs go, he wasn't from a very big high school program. We have schools here. There's a school named Eden Prairie, a school named Wayzata. Big programs. We were at this recruiting visit where they had a bunch of kids from across the state, and all these kids are there with their Letterman's jackets on to show that they're from the big schools, and they had their state patches on. And Boston is just in shorts and a t-shirt. And the head coach is talking to a group of kids, and he looks up and he sees my son, looks him in the face, and says, "Hey, you're Boston from Cambridge, right?" And then walked over and started talking to him because he knew who he was. He said, "I saw the game when we had a superstar football player. This kid broke his hand. Boston had to be our kickoff and punt returner and our everything guy. And he had an amazing game. We lost the game, but he had an amazing game. I was at that game. It was great. He had a relationship with my son without ever having to have a conversation with him because he knew who he was. If there's a descendant coming to school at Virginia Tech, there better be somebody that knows everything about that individual, whoever that individual is. You know what I mean? And it's not about, hey, if you need us. It's about, hey, we know we want to be in community with you because we are family. We are housed where you were housed, where you were held. We want to bridge that. Does that make sense when I say that? That's proactively doing the work. Not when that descendant is about to fail out, well, we can get them this or we can get them that. In fact, I will tell you this. If I know I feel that, I paid more money for my kid to go to Bethel than I did for him to go someplace else. But I knew he was going to belong there. And I knew he would graduate. It took him 5.5 years, but he graduated. You know what I mean? So much so that my daughter saw that. She wanted that same thing, but she wanted to be different from him. So she wanted to choose her own path. And she went to a school that she did not feel like she belonged to at all, and then came back. You know what I mean? So how do you build structures of belonging? Because achievement is going to come. So many of us focus on achievement. You know? And if you don't have the pinnacle of Maslow's self-actualization, if you don't have belonging, you will never self-actualize. You never decide who you want to be and how to utilize that access and opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
It's a term I've coined as optics equity. They can give our family free tuition, and the optics looks really, really freaking good. They can bring the news in and they'll say, "Look, we're giving these folks free tuition." But if we don't have structures that say they can belong here, there was a point in time within our district you can walk down the high school halls and you can look into classes and tell if it was an AP class or an on-grade level class because of who was in the classroom. Somebody at one point walked down the hallway and said, "This is not right. This is not equity." And so what they did was they dropped the standards to get into that class. And now all of a sudden, you've got all these faces of color in this AP class. But none of them have the skills to pass the class. So we just took all those kids, put them in a class that they're going to fail. We'd be better off leaving them in the on-grade level class and letting them get a C. You don't fix your AP demographics in the 11th grade, you fix them in the 3rd grade. You fix them by building structures to ensure that students from 3rd grade on know that this is where they're supposed to be. And this is what they can do by making it relevant to them. You know, that same mindset needs to hit at Virginia Tech. You know what I mean?
You shared with us before the interview, but for the record, do you mind talking about the painting, the relationship you have to the painting?
Yep. So that painting was given to me by a teacher who retired early from our school district. This particular teacher had the label as being the most racist teacher in the school in the building. Not only by children, but by adults as well. And so there's a lot of folks that do this work from a place, so we just need to fire all the racist teachers. My response to that is, well, where the hell are we going to find a teacher to replace them? You know what I mean? So what if he's not a racist? What if he just doesn't understand or have the skills and knowledge to walk the path we want to walk? So how about we try to do that work? And I started out by observing him, and I can see the things he was doing could be tied to what someone would at one point call the best practice in education. But then I could also see how they could impact the students in a different way. Like one of the structures that he had was, he was an art teacher, and kids would go into the classroom and they would just pull things out and things would be hectic. And so he started a structure that you lined up outside the door, and then when the bell rang, everyone was escorted in together. Well, I shouldn't say traditional structures, but what happened was the white students would show up to class with 2 minutes left to go on the bell. Students of color would show up to class with 30 seconds to go on the bell, sometimes 30 seconds past the bell rang. So you have this line that looks like the buses in Selma, where the optics just don't look very well. You know what I mean? Wasn't his intent, but this is the outcome. This line, having 30 kids in the class, the back of the line could be pretty long. He's an older gentleman, and yelling to the back of the line really didn't work well for him, so he got a whistle. He used the whistle to get students' attention. Again, the optics, here's a white teacher blowing a whistle at students of color in the back of the line to be quiet and assimilate to come into. The optics just weren't right. The reality is he did not have other tools within his tool belt to manage his classroom, because the kids he had today were not the kids that he had when he came into education 30 years prior. And he and I worked one-on-one. We did all the things we could do, and at one point in time, it was just, the reality is this: he was at a point in his career where learning all these new strategies, it wasn't in him, and it was time for him to move on. And he was grateful for the work that we did, and he actually painted me this picture, and I've had this picture here ever since. But he also, along with this, wrote a poem. And the poem was supposed to be along with the picture. You can see where the tape is ripped off, because I ripped the poem off and I gave it back to him. But the poem was all about how Frederick Douglass was an inspiration to him getting an education. So the most racist teacher in our district was inspired by Frederick Douglass. Layers and the complexity in that. And the poem spoke to how he's leaving education hurt, because he was not able to live up to the image that inspired him to get an education in the first place. And I gave it back to him. I said, that's not true. This is a snapshot of now that just says it's time for you to move on and do something else. But you've affected so many students of color, in the positive, who just aren't here. You just want to blow the whistle at them. You know what I mean? So that picture is there for two. One, inspiration of mine, but two, to remind me that you're more than just your actions. You know what I mean? We all have a unique frame. My frame is not right versus your frame. My frame is right for me. The only time I have an issue is if I'm not willing to expand my frame to understand where you're coming from. Right. And as an equity leader, I need to be able to expand my frame with that teacher who has that label, so I can understand where they're coming from. That's the only way I can help them expand their frame. So that's my picture. And if you notice, you can't see, is the only piece of artwork I have in my office. Mm-hmm. And that's purposeful, right, because I don't want to be distracted from, this is why I do the work. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So,
if you don't mind, I'd like to dive deeper into the complexities, mm-hmm, particularly around interracial histories of conflict and trauma. And feel free to pass on this if it makes you unsettled. Mm-hmm. Would you like to sit down and talk with the Preston, the family of enslavers that enslaved the fractions?
So this is the issue with, I always think back, when I hear a question like this, I always think back to Obama McCain. Mm-hmm. And I think to a video of a town hall meeting that McCain is having, and there's this cute little old lady that says, I just don't trust him, he's a Muslim, he's not an American, and McCain says, no, ma'am, I'm sorry. He's a good man, he's a family man, we just have a fundamental disagreement of how the country should run, is what he said. My work is about perspective, okay? It's about conviction. It is not my convictions, because I am not the only person in the school district. There are people who do not believe in the work that I do. They have talked about wanting to protect me from them. I'm like, screw that. Put their ass in that chair right there. Let's have a conversation. And in fact, I've had many of them. Actually, I had one a guy. He wouldn't come in. He wanted me to email him, and I said, just call me. And we had a long conversation. He told me about everything that was wrong with equity, and I was like, well, I'm not doing that. In fact, I'm doing this. He goes, oh, okay. Well, then what about this? Yep, not doing that either. I'm doing this. At the end of the conversation, he goes, man, I'd vote for you for school board. Why don't you run? And I said, well, first of all, I don't live here. And second of all, hell no, I don't want to be on the school board. You know what I mean? If we cannot sit down and have a conversation, understand the perspective. Here's the deal. If they own slaves today, I still want to have a conversation with them. It's going to be from a different place. They do not. So I don't have to have that conversation, you know? And so it's not on me to why would I have anger with them? You know, there are kids that I got into fist fights with back when I was a 5th grader. You know, should their kids be angry with me because I punched their dad in the face? You know, they probably wouldn't like the fact, but that's not who I am. Definitely not who my son is. You know what I mean? So absolutely. And to be able to understand their lived experience as well, you know, because that's a piece of the trauma puzzle that we don't ever talk about. You know, we want to shine the picture on white privilege is what we want to shine the picture to. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But dang it, if you know that you're here because the person I'm sitting next to, I got this. I'm not even call it a step up. I didn't have to climb out of a hole that they did because my family dug the hole. There's trauma there as well. I'm not weighing the trauma. You know what I mean? I was actually. I'm sorry. I don't ask your questions. I ran. I was doing a PD once. And a school district.
Run for politics.
Absolutely not. But this will help with my point I'm trying to say here. But I was brought in by a director of equity from another school district. I was actually just an equity specialist, quote unquote, at the time. But he heard me speak and he's like, man, this kid, he's going to be it. This is the guy we need. And so I went in with a teacher from here. We did implicit bias training for the whole school district. And I always start equity trainings by asking the question, what are you expecting? What are you hoping for? And what are you worried about? Because I want to get out of the way right up front. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong for being white. This is my way of getting there. And sure enough, this man raises his hand and he wants to, and so we're having this conversation. And I tried to explain to him and I said, let me tell you, I want you to know who I am. I have a belief, and I want you all to hold your reaction to my belief until I finish what I have to say. I believe in 2024 calling a white person a racist elicits the exact same emotional response as calling a black person the N-word. Here, I see your face. I said emotional response. Whose response is that? That's yours. They are not the same. Mm-hmm. Their weight does not carry the same weight. One is from a place of privilege, where the other is from a place of marginalization. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about emotional response. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So if I'm saying that, if I can acknowledge that, and you can say, yeah, that makes sense. The trauma from coming from an enslaved family, there is trauma that lives from coming from a family that enslaved. Mm. They may not see it. They may need some time to understand that, and it's not my place to make them see it. And in fact, it's not even my place to tell them they have to see that. If you don't experience the trauma, that's spectacular. You know, I can't even remember her name, but there's that black woman that she's on that right wing, that everything you're saying is wrong. I've never dealt with it. That is spectacular. I am so happy for you in each. That doesn't mean that this person didn't experience that. So where I can't put my values on you, you can't put your values on them as well. You know what I mean? So if they never come to that, awesome. It truly is not going to affect my life one bit. You know what I mean? But would I love to have a conversation? Absolutely I would. And not about, hey, your family hung my family. Absolutely not. But about, hey, what brought you to where you are? Let me tell you what brought me to where I am. You know what I mean? And now how can we build something? If we're going to commit to something, what are we going to commit to? You know, you want me to say something really controversial? I think their kids get free tuition too. I truly do, because I wouldn't, if you can get it, I wouldn't get free tuition if it wasn't for what their family did. You know what I mean? And I'd rather be in that class learning with that person, building a bond, a community, because we're tied together. You know, I remember when I saw the face, the painting, my mom sent me like this, and I was like, that white man looks just like my mama. So we're probably all related anyway.
Don't go there.
It's not, but but where am I going? It's reality. You know, we're probably all related anyway. You know what I mean? So how do we bridge that bond and decide the commitment that we move forward with should be our commitment? You know what I mean? Because the first thing that'll happen is if let's say you do get free tuition for every black face that can tie themselves to the fraction last name, equity means you're taking away from us to give to them. That's the first lie we have to stop telling ourselves about equity work. We have been doing that, and that needs to frickin' stop. You know what I'm saying? So, sorry, controversial. It could be, and make sure you put the whole thing together. Calling a white person a racist is not the same as calling a black person the N-word. It's the internal emotional response. Maslow, your safety is triggered by these two things from completely different places. The director stopped the PD, and like he and I had to have a discussion, one black man to black man, in the middle of this PD, and all these white faces were doing this. And then finally he goes, all right, you're right. And we moved on, and it was great. But so, all right, sorry, you were going to ask something else.
Well, I mean, you've answered probably my next two questions in your own unique way, and it's a very refreshing perspective to hear. It's very unique, so I appreciate you sharing that with us. Even though you saw me grimace at one point, but I followed you. I stuck with it, and I appreciate that. You said something really interesting, so I want to kind of flip it around on you. As far as what you would like to see come out of a project like this, what are you expecting? What are you hopeful for? What are you scared of? Or what are you worried about?
If I can be 100% honest, I have zero clue what I want to see out of a project like this. I truly don't. As I told you all, I did not think that I was the person to be interviewed for this type of project. I see my mom being interviewed for this type of project. I think that it's sad that I don't see myself as someone being interviewed about this project. I see us as a communal culture being individualized. You know what I mean? So me even understanding my history to that point, I'll be honest, I don't have time. And if the book you wrote hadn't been double-spaced, I probably wouldn't have read it. You know what I mean? I'm okay that it's twice as thick as everything else. As long as it's double-spaced, I was like, all right, double-spaced, that gives me time to read. I don't know why that is, but if single-spaced, I wouldn't have read it. You know what I mean? But anyway, so I don't know. What was I worried about? I was worried that I promote that knowing your past is an important piece of the educational experience. But if I can be vulnerable, I have not made my past relevant to me to want to do that. There is no time frame on life to say that, well, you're 48, you should have done it by now. There's no time frame on that, you know. So there's always time for me for that to come into my life to be relevant. And so my worry was that me not having that would mean that I wouldn't have anything relevant or valid to say within this project. My hope is that people can hear my passion for the fact that it's more than about opportunity and access, that we need to be able to come together to have some shared convictions around the things we're trying to do, that if we want to, whatever we choose to commit to has to be our commitment, not their commitment. You know what I mean? I could probably talk for another 3 hours on that, but I'll just stop with that.
Okay.
But No, like I told you, I didn't want to do this. This is outside of my comfort zone. You know, you'll notice I did not speak much about myself in this. I spoke about the work that I do, because that's who I am. I have tattooed on my arm that says I am second, because that's how I choose to live my life. You know what I mean? And so I was worried that not being willing to be someone who talks to tell you all the deep dark secrets of my life, that I have nothing interesting to say. So I just hope that we can pull something from this that you all find beneficial. She just gave me a look.
You don't think what you said has already been extremely interesting?
I'm about to be the Dr. King of educational equity. I know what I'm saying.
Okay.
Well, once again, you predicted my next question. I wanted to ask about your tattoo. With that, I will ask one final question, though. I think that the profound potential of oral history is not only that it documents a more distant, deeper past, but it records the current moment.
Mm-hmm.
And if you wanted to leave a record for the future, for your own descendants, what would you want them to know about your life and times?
I will say that in my life and times growing up as a black man in America, coming from the culture that birthed hip-hop, coming from a time where they expected 1 in 5 of us to graduate college, and 2 of us to go to jail, and 2 of us to be killed. I would like to know that I am so grateful for my tight family bonds that have helped keep me from walking that path. I was doing things to try to walk myself down that path, but I was, as I reflect back on myself, what I would call a pretend bad kid. You know, I was trying to live up and be something that I saw someone else being, that I thought I was supposed to be. And I had all these powerful role models within my life that it just took me some time to realize who they were. You know what I mean? And I can outline my great uncle Ronnie taught me how to be the coolest black dude on the planet. My grandfather taught me that sometimes you have to sacrifice, you know, for family. And even though you sacrifice, you still can get to and achieve what you want to be. My uncle Bunky taught me that you can build anything. You don't need anybody for anything if you just take the time to figure that piece out. My uncle Kevin taught me law and order. He taught me how to be organized. My uncle Mickey taught me how not to take life too seriously. You know what I mean? And just live life. My Uncle Greg still trying to figure out what he taught me. But he taught me we used to have fun and party a lot together. You know what I mean? But my father and I didn't say this here. My last name is hyphenated, then Knighton, because my father was my stepdad, who my mom divorced, but I still lived with him. He grew up my father. He taught me what being a father was actually about. You know what I mean? William McIntosh, my biological father, he taught me what not being a father was all about. And I'm grateful for him for teaching me that. You know, I hold no anger. You know, I'm indifferent for him. But he taught, I learned something. You know what I mean? So I listed all the men because there's only a few of us. There's too many women in my family to list. We don't make dull knives in my family when it comes to the powerful women we have in our family. You know what I mean? And so all of this support, and I'm able to look at every step I take, every aspect, everything you all heard from me today came from my ancestors. This is not new knowledge for me. This is knowledge that my ancestors gave to me. Even the ancestors I don't know. You know, I know I've got some, you know, one of my mentors, he's indigenous. He's like, you're one of us too. You just don't know it yet. And I won't do that 23andMe thing to find out because I don't trust it. That's the government trying to take my DNA, something like that. I ain't going to do it to find out, but I'm just going to believe him. But all this comes from our ancestors, you know. And here's what to bring it back to, here's what I appreciate about, I hear what you said about the Oral History Project. one of the models that I use, the lens that I use to do this work through is called the CLEAR model. This model says, as I'm doing my work, there's 5 letters, CLEAR, culture, learning, equitable, achievement, responsive. In learning, the focus of learning is you're giving choice as to how I learn. I told you, if your book was not double-spaced, I probably wouldn't have read it. And I would have missed out on some knowledge. But had you read your book and I got to listen to it, I guarantee you I would have finished that book. You know, so we all learn differently. So what we're doing is we're giving a different way to be able to share the perspectives with folks that fit the learning style of those that want this. And so that's what I appreciate about this process. Again, I didn't know where I fit in this process, but I'm happy we did it. You know what I mean? So
Thank you.
Him as well. Is there anything that I asked or that I haven't
I don't think you
asked,
asked anything. I'm sorry.
Not just now. Throughout the entire
I don't think I let you
interview.
ask anything this whole time. I think you asked me, can you say your name? And I think I just started talking.
Was there anything that we've discussed throughout the interview that you would like to return to?
Like I said, you asked me the question, would I sit down with a Preston?
Mm-hmm.
And I say, shit, yeah, I would. I think it'd be the most interesting conversation that I've ever had. I truly do.
I can make it happen.
You asked me about what should Virginia Tech do. I'm telling you, you got an educational powerhouse that's in your family. Put me at the table. You know, we'll have that. I am not about. I told you, reading my history. That's just I haven't got there yet. But making new history, that's the. I am application. I am not theory. You know what I mean? And so, as we look to grow this, we have geniuses in this family. And I only know that knowing half of a fraction of the fraction family. We have geniuses in this family. And how do we leverage this to change the system? You know, that's where I would hope that we would go with this work. You know what I mean?
Right on.
So.
Well, on behalf of Kira and Jason, it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely, thank you very
This
much. I
interview has
appreciate
been
it.
immaculate.
Oh, wow.
So,
Don't say
I want to thank you
that
for
stuff.
sharing your story with us today and helping us connect the legacy.
Just tell me it was better than Greg, Mickey, and I don't know if you talked to Kevin, but tell me it was better than them, and that'll be just fine. I'm just joking.
Now on record, sir. Now on record.
It's funny, you're saying that and nodding your head yes and behind the camera. That's
Now on
awesome.
record.
I bet your interviews are spectacular. I'm just joking.
Well, we want to thank you for sharing your story and helping us connect it to the history and the legacy of enslavement of the present lives of American descendants.
Absolutely. No problem. Thank you.